What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Body Lock. It's your man Ant Walker, joined by my good friend Matthew Wells. We are talking about the 2020 wrap up. Still, kind of looking back in the craziest year probably in human history, and looking at some of the past action and where things rank because we did have a lot of really ridiculous action going on in the cage, and as in addition to the news cycle, the general news cycle, which still is giving us tons of thrills. So before we continue this discussion, I want you to hit that like button, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Mr. Wells, now, as far as comeback of the year is concerned, what is your comeback of the year?
Man, so this year, the comebacks weren't as spectacular as other years past for me. But my number one, I believe I had Beneil Dariush over Drakkar Klose. And that is the one that we actually had a tie break overall in the body lock submissions here. But this was my number one. Beneil Dariush, Drakkar Klose. That was a hell of a fight. I would encourage anyone who has not seen that fight to go see it. If you go to UFC on their YouTube channel, they have their comeback of the year little compilation. And of course, that one's on there. And they pretty much show the whole fight. So there you go. There's a little shortcut to it if you haven't seen it. But Beneil Dariush was rocked. Looked like he was on his way out. And Drakkar Klose is a very talented fighter, man. And I thought he was about to close the show. But no. Beneil Dariush is a resilient guy, to say the very least. And pulled off the very impressive knockout when, it's nasty when you get those knockouts where the mouthpiece is kind of hanging out the side of the mouth. Like it didn't come all the way out. It's just like kind of just hanging there. Like those are a little bit special when it comes to the aftermath, the carnage you just laid down.
Definitely. It's really good though, to note like how crazy this was over Drakkar Klose. Drakkar Klose has quite the history of upsetting people. He has the history of taking someone who is considered dynamic, is considered a dangerous fighter, and making them look really ordinary. He did it to Venata. He did it to Bobby Green. He did it to Diakese as well. So this is a guy who has time and time again proven that if you are discussed among some of the elite, if you are someone who's considered a top level striker, or someone who is just a good finisher, he's going to go in there and make things really, really ugly for you. And that's exactly what it looked like he was doing against Beneil Dariush. He got in his face. He was tagging him up. He was lighting him up with combinations. And it looked like Dariush, who we've discussed before as having a suspect chin. The conversation about his chin was not that long ago. So we're thinking, okay, this is another time where Dariush has an opportunity to kind of make sure that he maintains his place in the division. But man, he's going to drop this opportunity, and we're seeing flashbacks to like the Edson Barboza fight and whatnot. Like, man, he's really about to drop this one pretty bad. And then all of a sudden the tables turn. He is given the punishment out, and this crazy sequence took place within like a minute. Mm-hmm. Like a minute of action to see the ebb and flow that crazy. It's kind of hard not to look at this as the comeback of the year. My number one pick as well. And quite honestly, I'm surprised this wasn't mentioned more so in the fight of the year conversations as well. Although it was a very short fight. I mean, we've had short fights make that fight of the year conversation. Now, I'm thinking of like Nick Diaz versus Paul Daly, or another all-time just stunning comeback knockout victory, and that was Chet Congo over Pat Barry. That's sort of the vein that this fight fell in my opinion, and a very, very good choice for comeback of the year. So if I'm not mistaken, we had the same picks on this one.
I believe we did.
Yeah, because my number two was Chase Hooper versus Peter Barrett.
Yes. Yeah, we both had that one at number two.
Yeah. This fight was pretty interesting, man. Without getting into the way I feel Chase Hooper is being matched up, first and foremost, I don't believe he belongs in the UFC right now at this stage of his career. I think he should be developing on the regional scene more. And as this fight was going on, he was very, very clearly outmatched on the feet. Very clearly outmatched. He's taking a boatload of punishment. The striking that he has been working on just proved to be very ineffective against Barrett. Looked like he didn't really have a whole lot of power behind his punches or anything. And he just seemed awkward on the feet. So it looked very, very unlikely that he was going to pull off some desperation submission move. But lo and behold, last round, that's exactly what he does, and gets a W. Learns a lot of lessons that normally put you in the loss column. Still got his hand raised. Still got those lessons learned. Matt, what did you think about that fight?
No, it was a perfect example of a guy who was completely outclassed for most of the fight. Where you, as the fight is unfolding, I mean, just listen to the commentary, that while they were being a little bit too harsh, maybe, if you go back and listen to that commentary, man, they were just, questioning, like, does this guy belong at this level right now? And, I'm kind of glad that he is there right now because, hey, there's not really any other promotion going on, so he can earn some cash for himself and make a living. So that's good in that regard. But he is literally learning on the job. How to compete at this level. And like you said, it would be ideal if he would have more regional experience to improve in certain areas, especially striking, obviously, because that's where he really needs to shore up some holes. But to pull off just the Hail Mary submission like that after really getting worked, just in the middle of that third round, that was his only passive victory. Just a couple more minutes off the clock, he's got his second loss in a row and very possibly getting cut from the UFC for the time being. I think he's got a lot of potential, but he has to add that striking element to his game and get that fixed up. He's 21 years old. He's a young guy, a lot of time. As long as he, wants to be around this sport, he's got a lot of time. But it wasn't looking good until that heel hook, got locked in.
Agreed. I mean, it was crazy. Like, they were seeming to make a case to just cut him in the middle of the fight.
Oh yeah,
like that was the commentary was pretty brutal against him, but understandably so considering what we were watching. And fortunately for him, his grappling skills are that high level to where he could pull off a Hail Mary submission. I don't think a lot of people understand how difficult it is to pull off a Hail Mary submission. It's one thing to land a big punch, because you can have a lucky punch. Like, a lucky punch does exist. You'll see plenty of examples throughout all of combat sports where a person has their head down and they're not looking at the target and they wing a big right hand and their opponent gets touched on the chin and it's over. They get their hand raised in the end. You don't have a lucky submission. There's no such thing as that. A submission is, unless someone falls into you as your arms are motioning for a rear naked choke, which is just totally silly. You have to set things up. You have to put someone's body where it's supposed to be. You have to have every limb and every spot and perfectly aligned to get a submission off. So fortunately for him, his skill level is that high to where, in desperation, probably concussed, battered, and I'm sure mentally just drained at that point, can still pull off something to land a victory. So hats off to him. Be curious to see how he develops, but a very well-deserved mention in the comeback of the year discussion. So Matt, number 3, believe we both shared this one as well. Walt Harris, unfortunately, did not get that huge win to sort of put a smile on our faces after such a horrible real life circumstance that he and his family are battling with. He loses a very tough fight to Alistair Overeem despite his early success, giving Alistair Overeem a strong case for comeback of the year. What was your initial impression of that fight?
It was one of those fights where I was like, man, I'm excited to see him, back in action, but It's Alistair Overeem. Like this is a tough matchup, man. I don't want to see him come out there after all he's been through, come back out there and take an L. And he looked good for a little bit, looked real good for a little bit, and then experience kicks in, right? Experience, miles and miles of experience. Like one of the most experienced guys around in the sport today, Alistair Overeem, who's been through all sorts of iterations of himself as a fighter. He's literally seen it all. And it also kind of speaks to how heavyweight MMA is as well. Guys, we see a lot of back and forth battles in heavyweight. Look, the most famous example of anything can happen in heavyweight MMA, I think, would be Derek Lewis and Alexander Volkov, right? That's just, a guy's getting beat from pillar to post and lands one punch with 10 seconds left and the fight's over. So it's unfortunate that Walt Harris had to take the L. He's since dropped another one to the aforementioned Alexander Volkov, but this was a good moment for Overeem as well. He still showed, obviously, that listen, I'm the savvy veteran, the savviest of savvy veterans. Like I'm going to figure out a way to get a win. Like no matter what you're throwing at me, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to more than likely come away with the W here, unless if you're Francis Ngannou and turn him into a Pez dispenser.
Well, similar to Beneil Dariush, who earned the #1 spot from both of us, and I think from the staff overall at the Body Lock. We have been questioning Alistair Overeem's chin for quite some time. It's a guy who's been on the wrong side of many, many knockouts. Between his MMA and kickboxing career, he's been knocked out no less than 20 times. So very, very concerning, first and foremost, as far as his health and safety is concerned. But then you think a very unlikely person to get a comeback like that. For someone as powerful as Walt Harris to get the upper hand on you striking wise, drop you to the floor, follow up with some shots, and then a few blinks of the eye later, and he's getting his hand raised right there. That's crazy. That's a crazy circumstance. And knowing what we know about Alistair Overeem, it's not something that we see quite often. And that was definitely savvy veteran moves that he pulled there, and quite surprising that his chin was able to withstand that. So well-deserved comeback of the year mentioned right there for Alistair Overeem. Are there any other fights that come to mind for you this year? I'm kind of with you on what you said at the beginning. This year didn't have kind of the same pizzazz in a lot of the potential comeback of the years. But was there anything that's standing out from you that we might have missed today?
Brian Kelleher had a nice little comeback against Azure. There was also the Daniel Rodriguez and Grant fight. These are just a couple of fights that got votes here on the Body Lock panel. But the other one that's not on the list in this particular category, that is in another category, was Damon Jackson, Fortis MMA, and his comeback on Mirsad Bektic. But there really wasn't high level. I guess the highest level, championship fight, comeback sort of thing that I could think of really. I guess if you want to give a nod to Weili Zhang a little bit, because, she was kind of out of it there for a little bit, but she figured out, I believe at the end of the second round, she was out of it a little bit. Corner was kind of concerned, but, she ended up finding a way to excel as the fight went on from that point, and kind of hit a second wind and excel on against a Ioana Jędrzejczyk, which is just crazy to do. But yeah, man, we didn't see that statement comeback in a title fight or a title eliminator that at least comes to mind this year.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One thing I think was missing from the list of nominees we had, and I think a lot of times is missing overall from the comeback of the year discussion, is the overall career arc of someone. Someone who, for whatever reason, we might have forgotten about. Maybe they were inactive for a while, maybe coming out of a retirement, whatever the case may be. They ended their inactivity with some stellar results in cage. Now, the first person that comes to mind, Neil Magne. This is a gentleman who had been out for quite some time, when we last saw him before 2020 began, it was the end of 2018, where he was knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio. He takes time off. I'm assuming due to injury. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but he did have some sort of issue with USADA that delayed a comeback last summer or the summer before, I believe that was. And he had to spend a little more time on the shelf. He comes back in 2020 with 3 victories, a stellar performance against Li Jingliang. He absolutely dominates Rocco Martin, and then has his way with Robbie Lawler, and really just takes the bull by the horns and reestablishes himself as one of the premier welterweights in the UFC. I think Neil Magny needs to be talked about in some of these conversations, because to have that level of inactivity, to have USADA issues, to have injuries, and then to return looking that sharp, looking so improved and closing so many holes in his game that existed previously, that's comeback of the year stuff, in my opinion.
No, yeah. I mean, you make fantastic points, and Neil Magny is one of my favorite fighters around too. So I'm all about giving him some love, man. Not gonna miss me there at all. He had a hell of a run this year, and he's not really mentioned in I guess what was it fighters of the year conversation either, really.
Right.
Three wins, like in this year, to make it to the cage 3 times is a feat in itself in this COVID era. So yeah.
I think we could also talk about Sean Strickland in that conversation too. He had a great deal of time off, I believe, due to a car accident or a motorcycle accident.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to get himself back in shape, getting back in the cage, and having great results there, leading to actually one of the more memorable moments of all the fights we had in 2020, with him having full-on conversations, encouraging his opponent to hit him. And quote unquote, I'll give you a chance to win, as the clock is ticking down for what would be a surefire decision win. So I think Sean Strickland deserves a mention as well. Maybe we can also talk about Brian Ortega. We last saw him getting annihilated by Max Holloway, and then he closes a lot of those holes with his time off, and completely pieces up Korean Zombie in a main event. So some actually good. Some good entries right there for comeback of the year, whether it be the career arc or just individual fights. Even though the individual fights kind of lack that spark that we had in previous years, still some good stuff to choose from.
100%, man. 100%. I am curious to see if anyone watching the video has any other fight that we haven't mentioned or career arc of 2020 that we haven't mentioned. Drop it in the comments below. We do read every comment. We reply to most of them, unless you're just being a complete jackass. But yeah, we appreciate it. Let us know below in the comments.
So remember, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. I'm Matt Walker. He's Matt Wells. Thanks for watching. Tune in for more.